Welcome to Laptop Radio. Today's topic is structured interview assessment and its impact on employment culture. We have Brent Powell with us, and he is the head of talent acquisition and executive search with Samsung Strategy and Innovation Center. Hello, Brent.
Hi, Michelle.
Thank you. I'm awesome. I'm really excited about this talk.
Me too. Me too.
Tell us about you and what is your story?
I have been in the recruiting business for a long time. Ironically, started right out of school and worked a variety of companies from Adobe to my current role at Samsung and everything in between. Most recently, more focused on venture capital and startups, building startups from employee number one, so hiring CEOs while at BCGDV. And I did a short stint as a retained recruiter serving seed to mid-sized level startups. And my story is I've been in the big corporate environments and in the small corporate environments, startups, and as an independent. And so I've sort of seen, and also agencies early in the career. So I've seen it from every angle, this whole recruitment thing. And it always comes back to this, for me at least, this, how do you structure interviews? How do you work through assessment, and why do you do it the way you do? And for me, it's always been about making an impact, and specifically discovered it's a great way, maybe the best way, to have an impact on employment culture.
What is a structured interview?
So it's an organized, it's basically, going into an interview process with a well-orchestrated game plan. For me, when you do an intake with a hiring manager, you ask them basic questions like, what are you looking for? And they tell you, I'm looking for somebody short, somebody tall, somebody sad, somebody funny, whatever it is they think they need, right? And I respond immediately with no hesitation. I can find that for you, but what do these people actually need to know to be successful in the role? Like, what are the core skills this person needs to possess to be successful in the role? Mm-hmm. And I tell them, like, you don't need to have a comprehensive list right now, but just give me a couple of things to start with. And then and then depending on the environment, if the company or the organization has a strong culture, meaning, or the role sometimes would benefit from evaluating certain values. So like if like at SSIC, we're really focused on innovation, and so maybe assessing somebody's ability to learn fast would be a great thing to assess. So I ask for a couple of those things, right? Some of the intangible, and I like to actually connect those to the company's mission or core values or whatever you want to call them, and incorporate that into the assessment process. And that's sort of a new thing. There's a lot of companies doing it, but I don't think 5 years ago there were many people that even considered assessing the culture in the interview process. Or if they did, they didn't know how to do it, and they weren't tying it directly to what the company's culture was saying it was. So this is sort of putting the rubber to the road, so to speak, when it comes to that. So I say, great, we have a conversation around those things, and I take some notes. And then the real question is, and this is the structured part, is like, who's on the interview team? And usually you want to have a couple of people that intimately understand the role. So maybe somebody that's currently in the role at the level you're recruiting for, or possibly somebody a level above or a level below, but somebody who intimately understands what it means to be in that role. And then a team member of some sort, somebody, if it's product, or if it's engineering, somebody from product, if it's product, somebody from engineering, but somebody that the individual that you're recruiting is actually going to be working with. And they usually their focus usually is that culture piece, whereas the core skills are going to be more the folks that have actually worked in that role. Mm-hmm. And so you try to assign, at least I try to assign, the core skills to those folks, and the culture pieces to the team member. And then there's also the hiring manager, and maybe an executive, if you wanted to have an executive, depends really, however you want to, if you want to add people, you can, but really at its core, that's all you need are those four people in the recruiter, maybe somebody from HR or something like that. But usually at its core, that's all it is. And once I have that list of names from him or her, I schedule a meeting with that team, and we have the same exact conversation. What are we looking for? Short, tall, sad, funny. What are the core skills? What are the cultural values that we want to assess that we think are important for this person to emulate to be successful in the role? And then I'll train that team on, as best I can in that 30 or 45 minute meeting, on things that they should be doing once we end the meeting. So, considering the core skills that we've set out to assess by name, we also will actually define what those mean. So if it's, I don't know, give me a skill. I'm blanking. But anyways, if it's some sort of core skill, not only what the name of that core skill is, but how it'll be used in the role and why it's important. And the reason I do that is I want everyone on the interview team to understand precisely why it is that we're assessing the things that we're assessing, and I want them to agree on. So it's not we're telling you this is what you're assessing. It's what should we, it's a conversation. What should we actually be assessing in this process? And once we finish that meeting, then the recruiting starts, the interviewing starts. You go through a couple of rounds of interviews. You hold a debrief meeting, and in those debrief meetings, you decide what the next step might be. In some companies that I've worked at, that next step is a hiring decision, yes or no. In other companies, it's have them meet more senior individuals, like at Samsung, for instance. The president likes to meet everybody. So it really depends on the environment that you're in. But the idea is, once you've done the initial interview, and you can throw things like practical interviews in there too. You can give them a case study. There's other things that you can do to help the team sort of assess whether or not they have the actual core skills. But at the end of the day, it's defining what they are, understanding why they're important, assigning topic areas to interviewers, and debriefing against those and scoring them, however you decide to score them, and then coming up with a decision of some sort on what the next step might be, and conveying all those things to the candidate. So it comes back to candidate experience. That's what a structured interview is to me.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, I've been through some of them.
I'm sure you have.
It's a lot of fun. You get to meet a lot of people in one day.
It is fun. Yeah, I mean, you what's funny is now, when we were doing them in person, we were pushing for all in one day, and decision or debrief the same day, and then communicating that back the date, the results to the candidate in the same day. And it does make it fun, because it's like I go through this experience, I find out how I did. If it was positive, I look forward to the next step. If it wasn't, then, I use it as an opportunity to figure out how to improve for next time. But it happens quickly, and it's the benefit for everyone is immediate.
Awesome. I remember there was one interview I went to. There was a fire drill in the middle of the interview, and I was wearing these really high heels.
I was going to guess high heels, yeah.
Let's talk about assessment. Assessments
Okay.
would be the most important part of talent acquisition. So I'm really interested to know, what would be some of the soft skills besides those core skills that companies should look for? And what are some of the red flags? Because I think HR and interviewing process is really vital in filtering a candidate and making sure that they're the right person.
Yeah, from a recruiter perspective, you go through an initial screen, you ask questions, you review those questions against maybe their background. You try to figure out sort of why they've made decisions along the way, and essentially get into their head a little bit and try and figure out where their mind is, both about stuff that they've done previously and about what they want to do next. And, the red flags for me, I mean, like the first one, usually the most obvious one, is attitude. Going into any interview with an air of arrogance, or, it doesn't necessarily mean you won't get the job, but I don't think, at least in the initial stages, I don't think it's going to help you. Because it gives the recruiter something to talk about. It gives the hiring team something to look for when they're interviewing. And essentially, I feel like in the beginning, that's kind of my role, is like, be on the lookout for these things. Be it negative or be it positive. Like, I really thought they were wonderful on all accounts. They were enthusiastic. They seemed intellectually interested. They were engaged, and they were what I would consider easy to work with. I think you'll really appreciate the conversation. And then I can highlight some specific reasons why. But if you give the recruiter maybe a different experience, maybe their introduction isn't as flattering. So anyway, those are red flags. Other red flags, I mean, it really depends on the situation, but I mean, it could be, if they're, well, I mean, the obvious. I hate red flags, to be honest. Like, it's such.
I know, but I think if we don't talk about it, people won't know, right?
Yeah, no, that's fair. But I mean, it's like it's red flags for me, because we're dealing with humans.
That's true.
And so when you see, so it's sort of like, where there's smoke, there's fire. That's kind of what a red flag is.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes that it's situational. And so I actually, when there is a red flag, I spend a lot of time flushing it out, because I don't want the individual to be penalized because they were in a situation that was wasn't conducive. And you know, everyone's been in those situations, right? I mean,
Yeah.
in one of your previous shows, you were talking about how to hire or how to date a co-founder, or I don't know what it was, but it was something about co-founders.
How to find the right co-founder, and it's like dating.
Right, and it's like dating. So you know, you catch somebody on a bad day, maybe it's not a good date, or you know, they're in their background somewhere they had a bad day, or someone they're working with had a bad day, and it didn't go well. And you know, negative things happen as a result. So I try to take all that stuff with a grain of salt to a point, and I truly, it's somewhere in the back of my head, I'm cheering for every candidate. I want them to win, and so instead of focusing on red flags and coming up with reasons to screen you out, I like to, I mean, this is just me. Some recruiters do it the other, like they want to screen everybody, the people out. I spend more time screening people in.
Awesome.
I want to know the good stuff. I want to know what makes you great. I want to enjoy the conversation. I want to enjoy you as the individual I'm speaking with. And I want to come up with reasons why they should consider you. And to some degree, I think when you're focused on core skills and core values, you're trying to get to the core of the individual. And when you do that, you can ignore brand. You can ignore, if the role doesn't require presentation skills, you can to some degree ignore presentation skills and just focus on what they're good at.
Mm-hmm.
And if that's what you need for that role, then you know, it's like we're actually evaluating the human and not the resume or the brand of the companies they worked for, or you know, appearance, although appearance does count for something, but it's really about the core human. And I mean, even with executives, I spend a lot of time trying to understand what it would be like to work with that individual. And what I mean by that is, like, if you're in a situation where, you know, if you're an executive and you have a team and there's an issue on your team, how you deal with that issue, to me, might might describe what kind of human you are. And I'm not saying there aren't going to be situations that require drastic decisions, but I do believe they can be, all these situations can be handled with tact, where you're respectful of the other individuals. And it's funny, you're going to laugh when I say this, but there are a handful of executives that I've hired at the C level or senior vice president and VP level that I would characterize as good humans. Some of these good humans, meaning they're potentially the smartest person in the room in any given room that they're in, but they're wise enough to know when they don't need to be. And that's a statement that I say that a lot. I like the meaning behind it. You know, you're a good human. Just because you're the smartest person in the room doesn't mean you should treat everybody like they're dirt and that kind of thing, right? Because everybody adds value. So I don't know, red flags, not really my area of expertise. Screening in the good things, I spend a lot of time with that. If you catch me calling out a red flag with a candidate, it's going to be a pretty red flag.
That's what I meant. Talking about lies and different things.
Lying is a great way to not get the job.
Exactly. I've never met anyone who lied before, but in the startup world, there are people who lie. So I think that's one of the reasons I asked about red flag, because I'm more grateful of the whole interview process and HR, working with different people
Different perspectives.
in the startup world. Exactly.
Right.
Yes, different perspectives. I'm really grateful. That's why I call it red flag. It's because not because I want to. It is because there are people out there who do lie. And if you do spot something, it usually is a really, really, really red flag and not something light. Most humans, though, are awesome.
Most of them are, right. So yeah, I mean, you gotta pay attention to it, but I don't think it needs to be the focus of your search.
How do you balance between the skills that are needed and the skills that are good to have?
It's interesting. I mean, I think when I talk to candidates and I know sort of what the core of the role is, and I speak to somebody that has most of it, I will tell them, you have most of everything that I'm looking for. I really like your background, and these are the things I like that I wasn't actually seeking, but these are skills that you have. And when I think about a hiring manager and how they're trying to staff a team, they're given an opportunity to hire a role. And in a very structured environment, you've got your core skills and your core values, and that's what you're recruiting for, and you hire that person, and you're done. But that's in a perfect world, right? And when I do a structured interview, I like to call out, like, we're going to structure it, but recognize at the same time it's not inflexible.
Mm-hmm.
It's just giving us a basis to operate from, and in a beginning for us to talk about individuals that we think might be able to add value. There are skill gaps on any and every team. In a larger environment, it's difficult to know what all the skill gaps are in all the teams.
Mm-hmm.
Usually the hiring manager, especially if they're good, will have a decent understanding of what those are. And so when you bring a candidate to the table, when I do it, at least initially, not to the team, but to the individual I'm working with to build the pipeline and eventually move to interviews, I will couch individuals on why, and I'll explain why I brought them to the table. I brought them to the table because they had 3 of the 4 skills or 2 of the 4 skills or whatever it is, but they also have these other things. And I know peripherally, there's a group somewhere else that might be able to benefit from that. And so I thought it would be beneficial for you to see this. Do you agree?
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I mean by it's not. I mean, it's structured, but it's not at the same time. It's just it's a process that we can work through to characterize individuals that we meet in a way that's organized and makes sense, and we can rank it. At the end of those meetings, you can rank them any way you want to. In a perfect world, you were able to characterize the exact core skills that you need and the exact core values that they should emulate, and they should be absolutely stellar with each and every one of them, and you should just confidently make the decision to hire them. But we are dealing with human. We are dealing with time and business needs, and sometimes there's a business case for hiring an individual that fills the skill gap in unique and different ways.
With the unemployment and a candidate-driven market and the skills gap, and on the other hand, you want a person who fits into the mission, believes in the mission, has culture and the soft skills, right? A good human, and also the core skills to do the job. How do you navigate through the noise to find the right person? How do you find the right person? Because I assume that there will be a lot of competition. There are a lot of people applying.
Yes. Yeah. And so that's a great question, especially considering today's climate. Yeah. I'll just tell you, like, most people will go to LinkedIn, they'll search for jobs on LinkedIn, and they think they're done. The reality is not all the jobs are posted on LinkedIn. Not all the jobs that exist have been posted. Not all the skill gaps that have been filled the way they needed to be. So there may be somewhere in the back of somebody's head an opportunity somewhere on a team that they haven't fully vetted, meaning I have a need, I have the budget, or I know that I can hire another person to do some things, but I'm not quite sure how to characterize it, or I don't have time to create a rec, or I don't have time to go through the approval process, whatever. But if I as a recruiter bring somebody to the table that could be a great fit, that I've vetted, that I know that my friend Michelle had referred to me, and so I know they're excellent or whatever, they may change their mind and accelerate that process and open a rec and interview you. So the reason why I bring that up is you go to a career site at Microsoft.com and you look at the jobs at Microsoft.com or LinkedIn or whatever company it is that you're interested in working at. That's one way to do it. You may see that Microsoft has 17,000 job openings on Microsoft.com, but if you go to LinkedIn.com and search jobs at Microsoft, you might see that there's only 15,000, or maybe you'll see that there's 18,000. The reason I'm making that point is if you're in the market for a job, or if you're looking for work, applying to jobs isn't, it's a part of the process. It's not the process. Networking is really the process. And what I mean by that is, I've introduced people to you, Michelle, that I absolutely adore, and I think are wonderful.
Them. Yes, you love them.
I love them all. Mm-hmm. And I tell them every time I talk to them, how come you're not doing more of this stuff? You should be a keynote speaker everywhere you go. You should be doing this, and that. and they agree, but they just don't. They're inundated with life and work and everything else, and they don't make time for it. Those are the things you need to be making time for. I'm going through an outplacement process with a number of people that were at a startup that was recently shut down, and I'm essentially coaching these people on things that they need to be doing as they kick off this new career transition that they're going through. Mm-hmm. And writing a new resume, absolutely something you should be doing. Making sure you have a headline in there and some bullet points in your core skills, and you understand your 30-second pitch, Like, have all that stuff, work through those processes. You have to do that. Apply to jobs. Yes, you have to do that. But more importantly, when you apply to the job, your work is not over. You need to know who works there. You need to meet someone. If you don't know anyone that works there, meet someone who does, or meet someone that knows someone that does, and have those conversations. And don't just ask, hey, will you introduce me to the person that is recruiting against that? Without any substance, rarely turns out well. There needs to be substance there. And so develop relationships with people that could potentially help you do things. And that means have an intellectual conversation around something that's important to you or to them. It's more beneficial if it's important to them, because they'll enjoy it and remember you, and you'll have a good relationship. But that, to me, when you think about all the jobs that you've had, Michelle, how many times was it a retained recruiter that found you, hired you, or placed you and hired you, whatever? How many times was it that, or was it someone you knew, someone that you were introduced to? So that's an old school mentality. Like, it's not what you know, it's who you know, but it still holds true today. If anything, it may hold more truth today than it did yesterday.
That's so true.
It really is. Yeah. I mean, if you're gonna do that, just ask Michelle, who do you think might be a good person to ask?
Yeah.
Meaning, like, I'm interested in this role. Do you have any idea who you think might be the right person to talk to? Is it the recruiter? Is it the hiring manager? Who is it? But I don't know. Yeah, I do things. I've stress tested all of those interactions with people that you don't know.
Yeah.
And what I mean by stress tested, I've seen a role that's been opened at a well-known company. I've recognized that I knew an executive at that company. I've reached out to the executive and said, hey, can you pass my resume on to whoever's running the search for that? And that hasn't worked out. And I think largely it's because, C-level folks don't want that kind of responsibility unless it's something right there in their wheelhouse. Meaning if it was a CFO and I was doing strategy finance for them and they really appreciated me, then maybe. But if you're just recruiting for them, I don't know that's a great strategy. It might be, if you're in a different functional role, but for me, it hasn't really panned out. Where it's worked out for me from a relationship perspective is when I was a retained recruiter. Many of the VPs that I'd worked with previously, like helped recruit for them or helped recruit them, had come back to me and given me searches, right, at their startup or whatever company that they're at that they needed help with. That's where the executive level references have really helped. But in terms of, finding a role, it was really networking with my peers. And I would consider my peers somewhere between, individual contributor and director, senior director.
Mm-hmm.
That's just kind of where my people are, so to speak, the people that know my work.
Working at all these corporations, I think one of the most important is people and the relationships I have with them. Like after I left PayPal, I still keep in contact with a lot of my colleagues there, business people. In fact, I just had a call with one of my business person from PayPal today. And it's been many, many years. So I think it's kind of important to build your personal brand when you're working at different companies. If you actually do your work and you do your work well, and then you build really good relationships. I remember negotiating with teams like in the morning, at night, all the time. And
going above and beyond.
Yes, going above and beyond without any complaints.
Right.
And just really working as a team. They remember you. And I have people, I think I have a few people who I work with on the other side, opposing business people and opposing lawyers even, who seek me out even after I left PayPal.
And it was your attitude.
Yeah, I was fair when I was negotiating with them. Right. I got things done. Right. And it is that personal branding, and it's not just limited to the place. It's really who you are as a person.
Yeah.
Right? Whatever you do, that's you. And so it really doesn't matter. I mean, you could be working for Cisco or working for eBay. It's that core of you. That is really important.
I agree 100%. And it's, what's funny is if your early career, it's hard to know what you need to do that, to be that person, right? To be a good person, to be someone valuable. But I think if you just look around you and see what needs to be done and do it, versus in large corporate environments, sometimes it's like, well, that's not my job. There's a person for that, right, or whatever. That to me is the wrong attitude.
Yeah.
Um,
That
like
is not the right attitude.
it's not. I mean, no, and like one of the most collaborative people I know, one of the most influential people in terms of being able to deliver, cross-functional relationships, right? Buzzword was a gal that, when I was working with her, it's like, okay, well, let's make sure that we're advertising everywhere we can, all the good places, including schools. And she was an MBA from Kellogg, I think, and I had access to the Kellogg site. I could post to their MBA program, and it wasn't a big deal. But she's like, no, I'll do it. It's not a big deal. I'll do those. I'll do these. I'll do those. You do the other ones. And we did it as a team.
Mm-hmm.
She could have easily said, "Let me know when you have it all done." And what's interesting is she did that with everyone. It wasn't just me. In any situation that she found herself in, she was doing as much as she could to add value to get it going where it needed to go. And now she's an executive, I think, at Facebook somewhere.
Yeah, I mean, like, I help my business people with business terms as well sometimes, or with technology when something is new, because we integrated With Me Later. I was working on Zong. There's just, whenever there's a need, we're just there, and people remember you. Like, like I think the first year when I was at PayPal, we don't have a lot of lawyers. There was a guy, a business person there, whom I think I was working with him at the beginning of my PayPal career, and when I left, he actually seeked me out too. It was really interesting. It's pretty cool,
It
and
is.
I like that.
It makes you feel valued in ways that goes well beyond a paycheck.
Yeah, and it is that, and it is those relationships that are the most important. And I do keep in contact with everyone, and that those relationships kind of go with you from places to places, and I think that's the most awesome part.
It is. It is. Just don't burn any bridges, because those go with you from place to place too.
Or just be reasonable. I think it's kind of important that we learn how to confront and have like courageous conversations when something is, because I think communications and humans are not perfect.
Nope.
But sometimes when there is a challenge or some kind of misunderstanding, that people speak about it and resolve them and then kind of move on. I think those are the best relationship, because then they're not fake, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's the other thing, is be genuine.
Yeah. How are you with AI and new technology emerging?
Yes, that's a great question. I mean, a good topic. So I just went through and reviewed 4 different sourcing tools that utilized AI,
Mhm.
and some of them, it was almost like fake AI, and meaning it was like some form of Boolean that was sort of positioned as AI, but it's not really AI.
Mhm.
It wasn't actually doing calculations. It was taking, anyway. So some of them were not very good. Others were really, really good, but they fell down on maybe organization when it came to presenting the results. And others did everything wonderfully, but were very expensive.
Mhm.
All of them add a lot of value. Some of them require more manual input than others.
Mhm.
One of my favorites, is it okay to drop a name?
Yep.
Okay. So one of my favorites is HireTool.
Mhm.
And eventually we'll be purchasing it. I didn't purchase it this time. It's not my fault. Stop blaming me. but anyway, so that was one of my favorites. And it was able to, I mean, literally the AI was able to help me find, and it was an EIR search for somebody that happened to have expertise in 5G.
Oh wow.
And it was able to find that person, and I, as a result, was able to beat all the firms that we use that had all the relationships with all the entrepreneurs and leaders in this space that were giving us referrals because they wanted this project to take off. Yep. And the AI won. And the best part about the AI, for me at least, from a storytelling perspective, is when the candidate asked, "So how did you find me?" And I said, "Well, I didn't. The robot did." You're kidding me. I said, "No, a robot actually found you." I mean, I had to tell the robot what to look for, but yes, the robot found you. And they thought that was the greatest thing on the earth, on the planet. It's just a fun story.
Yeah. I love robots and AI. So it's kind of nice to hear stories, positive stories.
Yeah.
like that. What is the role of time when candidates and employers are in
Ah,
sync with their expectation? Because, sometimes the candidate is looking for a job immediately and companies may drag on their process, or they may
sure.
need someone immediately. How should people structure expectations?
It's a great question. I think, from a recruiting perspective, I set expectations on what the next step is.
Hmm.
The pitfall recruiters find themselves sometimes in is they're not able to define what the next step is, because hiring managers not able to be found, right? They're on holiday or something along those lines, right? Or there's something in the background that's keeping that person from telling you what's going on.
Hmm.
So maybe something's changed with the search or with the project or funding, who knows? So there are situations where you're not going to be able to get the answer that you need in terms of setting expectations. But communication in that situation is paramount. So even if I have nothing, if I can't tell you what's going on because I don't know, I'll tell you what I know.
Hmm.
And I will coach you on what I think you should do. If this is important to you, I know it's important to me, and I think it's important to them, then just be patient with me. Recognize that if this is the right thing, I'm not going to disappear on you. And the role is not going to disappear. There's nothing we can do to accelerate it at this point. I can have the conversations. There are certain situations where there are things that a candidate can do to accelerate things. You have to be pretty perceptive to deploy those things successfully, or you have to view your search as one giant negotiation. And in that case, you want to be managing expectations as a candidate with the employer respectfully, and letting them know that you're actively interviewing and that you potentially have opportunities on the table that could come to fruition before we're able to move, is an appropriate thing to say, and sometimes a great strategy. I personally have seen that fall on deaf ears, not because the candidate wasn't excellent, but because the business was not able to accelerate.
Yeah.
They don't like, in my particular group right now, they don't like to make decisions until they're totally confident they're making the right one. And they have right now they have the latitude to do that. They can get away with it.
And given the context of today, sometimes the acts of God disrupt time.
Yeah, it's true. Right. I mean, that's exactly what's happening now. I don't know. For me, I try to maintain a cheery attitude. I try to be collegial, collaborative, easy, whatever makes sense. If I'm in a situation where I'm currently employed and I don't need it to move along immediately, I let them know. If I'm in a situation where I'm going to negotiate this, I let them know, but I do it with tact, or I try to do it with tact,
Mhm.
and let them know I very, very much value this opportunity. I would love to be in the role. I'd love to work with you specifically, but I have obligations at home, and I have an opportunity that's been presented, or there are other companies that I also need to be respectful of. So help me, I've asked the recruiters, help me manage that.
Mhm.
And as a candidate, you're in every right. Help me manage that. Have that conversation, develop the relationship with the recruiter. And here's a great one. Compliment the recruiter. Recruiters get beat up. They don't get enough compliments. So they're doing something good, make sure they know it. And I think that'll pay dividends to you. But anyways, yeah, that's managing time it's an important piece of it. And when you're recruiting, I think building a target list of companies, tracking who you've reached out to, tracking what you think the next step is and when that next step should occur, and reviewing that on a daily or weekly basis, however often you need to, will help you immensely. Because just because somebody doesn't respond doesn't mean they didn't see your email or they're not interested.
It's like fundraising.
I've never actually gone through a fundraising process, so I'm going to have to take your word for it.
Yeah, it's like fundraising. I sometimes request companies, startups to do that, because sometimes some founders feel really entitled. They're like, "Oh, can you connect me with the VC?" I'm like, "Who do you want to talk to? Who is your target?" And I'm it's not my job to spoil anyone. It's their job as CEO and founder of their company to discover those things and track them.
Right. Yeah. I mean, what's funny is, to me, like, some of the CEOs don't know that the VCs want to talk to them.
Mhm.
Like they want to develop a relationship. Why aren't you reaching out? Or why aren't you actively doing that? Even if you don't need them to fund you, or you don't need anything from them.
Yeah.
Why aren't you developing those relationships?
I mean, like their websites are public. You can reach out to them, and it's kind of know what they would invest and what they wouldn't invest. So it's interesting to me. I think there are just different humans out there. And I think the process of looking for a job is very similar to the process of finding someone to date or looking for funding.
Okay, so what would you rather do? Find someone to date, look for funding, or be in a job search?
I think those are some of the skills that are transferable at different points in your life. So I think the answer really depends on the context of what your intention is. I think those skills are transferable. I think if you're looking for a date, like you said earlier, knowing what you want may be important. And then going out there, networking, going to parties, might be bookstores and whatnot. Might be, you just can't say you're looking for someone. You need to go and do something about it. But signing up for Tinder may not be enough. Just like looking for a job. Some people expect that if they just apply online, they'll find a job. That's not the case.
Nope.
So it's really
relationship.
similar.
You got to develop the relationship.
Exactly. For dating, fundraising, and looking for a job, you have to develop a relationship, and that takes some kind of effort. I mean, I don't want it to be manipulative, so I don't want to say that it's a job, but it's just really natural, right? It should be genuine.
You should want to do it.
Yeah. It's awesome. It's just talking to people and really knowing them. It's not, I won't advise that people go out there and use people per se, right? Like, oh, I wanted to know you because one day you'll find a job for me. That should not be the attitude.
It is though with many of them, and I tell candidates, I totally understand. Don't worry about it. I won't take it personally. You're fine. And I don't, but I do take note of those that I actually know are genuine.
Yeah. I mean, that's what it meant, right? Like, you know when someone's genuine, you can just kind of smell it. It's really obvious.
Yeah.
And diversity in the workplace. And the structuring and planning for diversity, do you recommend that companies really think about diversity in their hiring process and in their talent acquisition structure and plans?
It's funny. I've worked for companies that quietly that quietly made it their mission to be the first Silicon Valley company to hire greater than 50% of women in leadership roles. And I think that's an amazing mission. I loved it. I actually had really a great time helping them do that. And then I've worked for companies that tracked it because they felt like that was the right thing to do, but they didn't really value it. I could tell. I knew who the leaders, the HR folks, and I knew who they were, and I know how they thought. I knew them both personally, and I knew them professionally. And I promise you, they didn't value it. Not that they were against it, but it just wasn't the most important thing, or they genuinely didn't value it, I should say. I mean, it just was it was something to do. And maybe it was an optics thing. Maybe it was a branding thing. Who knows? I personally genuinely believe that more women in leadership roles is important. I think the benefits of doing that are just so obvious. But there are cultures, there's employment cultures that are more adept at being able to do that. And then there are some that aren't. And I've worked in all of them. There are tools today that can facilitate diversity recruitment in ways that could never be done before. In the early days, I would literally have to search by either female name, or if it was an executive that may have press releases, use pronouns and search for those. But today, you could literally say female. You could say, if it was a racial thing, you could determine I want racial, and it would bring you. It actually brings those results to you. It's amazing. Wow. It's quite amazing. So you have to be in an organization that organizes what they think they need, where they need to hire more, spend more time recruiting. When I build a pipeline, I try to ensure every single pipeline, if there's 10 people in that pipeline, that there's diversity built into the pipeline. I can't tell someone to hire somebody. It's always about hiring the best person. But I try to stack the deck so that the odds that the best person happen to be diverse are there.
Yeah. You're just really being conscious about it.
Literally being conscious about it.
Yeah.
And and I think from a quote, like there are companies that could literally look at where they're at now and where they need to improve, and then they could waterfall that down to TA, and TA could have an impact.
Yeah.
Companies, I think, are paying attention to that now in today's current environment. I wouldn't say that the from my perspective, some of them are genuinely interested in having an impact, and others, I think, are just doing it because it's what the culture wants right now.
Yeah.
That's sort of a sad reflection, but it's real.
Yeah. And I wanted to emphasize that not only is it important in the hiring process, but also in creating a culture where when they're working, it doesn't impact them among coworkers, and making sure that things are fair, because I think it's really important that the workforce is educated about our biases, to recognize them, and to really embrace that when, for diversity. I mean, I say that because I work at places where, someone said I look like Tila Tequila. And I didn't know who she was. So I did a search online.
I gotta be honest, I don't know who she is either.
Yeah, but don't do a search when you're at the workplace because that may not be appropriate.
Good advice.
Because I don't watch TV, so I really didn't know who she was, and so when I searched for her, I was in shock. I think it's kind of important to have that kind of education in the workplace, so that the people that you hire that are included, whether it's women or minorities or have a different sexual preference, that they are not shamed in the workplace.
Right.
I think that's really important.
Right. And I mean, that is such a huge thing. It's funny, like I literally have never, like it's never even dawned on me. Actually, if anything, if I met somebody that I felt like was going to add to the diversity of the team, I work extra hard to get that person in on the team. And it was funny, like now that I think about it, I started doing that in like 2000.
Wow.
Because it was this weird thing. Like I just felt like they weren't going to get a fair shake unless I stood up for them.
Yeah, I mean, I think human is human, and there's all kinds of humans. And there's just really good humans in all kinds of color. So, and I think that is just really, like, I think in the US there's a lot of nuances. So I think it's kind of important that education and conscious training plays a big part of that on onboarding as well. And, besides race and color and gender and sexual preference, there's also skinny people hatred. People who look pretty might not be hired because their team could feel threatened. They're just like different things.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
Yeah, it's. I think it just gets really interesting. I think it's kind of important that sometimes when we look at the culture of the group, we also balance that with what the organization need to move forward, right?
Yeah. It's interesting when you go through an interview process and you don't get the job, but you wanted it, and some people get depressed over that. And in my head, this is sort of off topic a little bit, but kind of not at the same time. In my head, the attitude is the same. It's the same advice mom was giving you and your kid. If it wasn't right then, it's not going to be right tomorrow. Just be grateful that you're not in the wrong role. The right role exists. The right team exists. The right culture exists. Let me do my part to make teams that don't have great cultures and try and fix them, and give me some time to do so. In the meantime, there are teams out there that are perfectly suited for you, whoever you may be. I don't know. I mean, the question. I love the question. It's a complicated one, and it's not complicated at the same time.
Yeah.
What complicates it? What complicates it is bias.
Yeah, and
not,
usually it's
not understanding the solution. It's just bias.
And the bias could be personal as well. I usually don't take it personally if I don't get a job. There were some interviews I had. I was overqualified for the job because I just had too much experience, and the company were doing the things at the beginning stage, and I've done all of that already. So I was told that I had more experience than the hiring manager. If it's not a good fit, there's always another role for you if you are seeking a position. If you don't get the job, that's okay. There's another company out there. There's tons of companies who are hiring. And with your skill set, I'm sure you could benefit another company. It doesn't have to be that one, and you never know.
Yeah. There's stories. I have stories that I can't tell on the radio.
Yeah, I wanted to focus on the onboarding process right now because I know a talent acquisition, the whole experience of a candidate to employee is the whole journey is really important. And I think that's what onboarding process is.
Mm-hmm.
I know that sometimes like at big companies, they have this seminars that you go to on the first day and you get all the information and you introduce your team. At other smaller companies, you're basically, you go to work and you don't really have any of that, right? People are not going to hold your hands. So what is that value of having an onboarding process for your employee once you decide to hire them?
Yeah, I mean, so there's onboarding. You know, when you say onboarding to a recruiter, it usually means getting their badge and their computer and letting them know what their health benefits are and where they need to sign up for things like parking and such and such, all those things, all the little things, right, to get them just so that they can be on the team, and then someone on the team would actually do an onboarding in reference to what their actual work should look like. And sometimes it's an HR person, but it's always, some of the companies I worked at did utilize the buddy program.
Mm-hmm.
So, you'd go through a normal onboarding or HR orientation or whatever you want to call it, and then your buddy would come and get you from that process, and then show you to your desk and introduce you to the team and take you to lunch and be your buddy. And maybe that was for the week, right? Where your buddy's constantly checking in, making sure that they're getting acclimated and that kind of thing. I think that's a great concept. At the same time, it really depends on the team, how much hand-holding needs to take place. Mm-hmm. I've been in environments where some of the teams were really, really cliquey. And so, not hand-holding, but almost like defending, introducing to the cliques and helping them understand how to navigate and that kind of thing, I think is invaluable in those kinds of environments. But in your typical professional environment, when I started at Samsung, I joined a small team. I was, run through the sort of corporate gauntlet of getting my equipment and my, being orientated with, everybody else in the room. And then I was told, report to this address at this time. And I did. And I sat down and I started to introduce myself to people. And then, the person that hired me brought me around and introduced me to key executives. But it wasn't like a structured thing. Later on the week, then there were people doing presentations to teach you about the company and the history and the different org structures and getting all that, because it's a pretty complicated. I mean, Samsung's 300,000 people.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's complicated. There's a lot of different divisions. Now, SSIC is nowhere near that big. It's like 250 people. Don't confuse size of organization with level of influence, though, because it's a very influential team. But understanding the environment that they were operating in is pretty complex. So I mean, I think it's important, and I think every team has to do it the way that makes sense for them. And I go back to that cliquey statement. I wouldn't say Samsung's not cliquey, but some other companies that I've worked for are. And what I mean by cliquey, it's almost childish, like immature. And so navigating that, I think, really does require a little more handholding than maybe a Samsung.
Yeah, I used to work at Samsung, and I think my onboarding process is pretty good.
You worked at Samsung?
Yeah, I did. At the chips division. It was really small. Samsung wasn't really as popular as now when I was working there. I love the food and the subsidized breakfast and lunch. Yeah. I love Korean food, so I was really thrilled to be there.
The food is amazing.
The food is amazing.
They really did a great job on the food front. Of course, we're not enjoying it right now, but whatever.
Yeah, that's why I took the job. I mean, they have chefs.
they literally do. Yeah.
Yes. Samsung is pretty awesome.
It is. So was that here in San Jose?
San Jose, yes, near Cisco.
Yep. Still there. I have an office there and an office in Menlo Park.
Awesome.
Yeah, it's good stuff.
Good stuff. Yeah, I love their food. I mean, the building might look different now. It's pretty high tech now, but before it was a little bit different.
Yeah, now they've modernized that building. It's really nice. It's, I mean, really, really nice.
Yeah, I saw the Palo Alto office too. Oh my gosh.
Hmm.
On their Facebook, I was just like, wow. Yes, I used to work at Samsung.
I had no idea. All right, well then, now I like you even more.
I want to talk about some of the challenges that you faced, or just anyone, or even the companies face pertaining to acquiring talent today.
Today, today it's difficult because you're not able to sort of develop the face-to-face relationship.
Mhm.
And I know teams that refuse to hire because of it. They're slow on the go. They're waiting for things to open up. They're slow rolling the search because they're afraid of making a hiring mistake, and they feel like they need to have that face to face to really know, if it's the right fit. So that's one of the challenges. I think, for me, some of the challenges I had pre-COVID, here at least, were the level of technical individual that you needed,
Mhm.
that had to have other skill sets. So PhD EE that also happens to be a really good negotiator, or someone that can characterize strategy, or someone that can predict the future of technology at the level of a CTO. Those kinds of challenges, which are fun. Those are a lot of fun to work through. It takes time, and it takes a good assessment process. But those are great challenges. It's not comp related. It's not culture related. It's not technology or product or space related. It's COVID and the very high bar this particular team has in regards to their individuals.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's it. I think pre-COVID, at any other company, if we specifically said, what was the most challenging thing at company X, I could tell you, right? Because I experienced it. But I think if I had to generalize for anybody,
Yeah.
it's raising the bar. Like, how do you raise the bar, and how can you confidently know that you did?
Mhm.
And there's ways to organize that so that you can tell the story that you raised the bar, and then the proof comes out in the pudding once the person's hired and on board. Are they an amazing hire? Are they doing the amazing work we expected them to do at the level we wanted them to be doing it at? So that's where the real proof comes. And I do things currently to try and assess that. Surveys and things of that nature. Surveying the person who hired them, and sometimes their team members, in increments, to determine that. And it's difficult to determine whether, even if you survey it, whether or not you're getting good data. But I think calling out, this is our intention.
Mhm.
This is what we're trying to do. We're doing it with these people that we think will help us level set and ensure that we've raised the bar. And then we're going to survey afterwards to see if we were successful at doing so.
Mhm. Which leads me to the next question about retention. I think I'm a little bit holistic here, but I think talent acquisition, onboarding employees, and giving them a environment, an ideal employee experience, and then also retaining them is really important, like you said, and making sure that the process is smooth. I think retention is part of talent acquisition and onboarding. What are some ways companies could do to retain talent?
It's important, I think, to understand your team. And I think retention, you know, there's some things that you can do as a company to incentivize leadership actively attempting to retain top talent
Hmm.
or critical talent. And one of the step one into that is identifying what it looks like, who it is. Step two, incentivize leadership to retain those individuals so that if there's an issue, there's a monetary incentive to resolve it. Don't make it like debilitating, but just so that they're aware. It's important. I've seen sometimes there's nothing you can do. If the situation, you're not able to leverage either somebody's ability or their desire, to leverage your current situation to facilitate somebody's desire to be involved in a technology or a project or something that they're really heartfelt for, and somebody else has an opportunity that would leverage that. There's not a lot you can do to win in that scenario. I will say, from a candidate's perspective, I've heard some very influential people, specifically the gentleman that that invented the Genius Bar for Apple. Tried to recruit him. And when I say invent, I mean he was involved, or he was one of the first. It might have been his idea. I don't know. I tried to recruit him. He says, I'm not sure I'm ready to leave, and I'm pretty happy where I'm at. And I said, well, typical recruiter response. It's like, well, everybody's happy where they're at, but couldn't you be happier? And what would it be? What would make you happier? And he says, well, I'll tell you what. When Apple stops innovating, I'll come back and we'll have that conversation. So, I mean, I think to some degree, it's company culture too.
Yeah.
And so Samsung, Samsung in general, I don't think has a retention issue. There are, certain individuals that are, these PhD folks that are very, very skilled, and maybe they're driven. And so to retain somebody like that, creating career path and actively managing it, having those discussions from leadership, from HR, so that you're at least having the dialogue and you have an opportunity to have the discussion. I think those are the things that you do to retain people.
Also provide good food.
Food, yeah. I mean, yeah, a simple answer would be more food, car allowance, bigger bonuses. Yeah, but no, I mean, I compensation obviously plays a role in it. But I think if there's an issue with compensation, it's not retention. It's are you able to attract? But retention in today's environment, it's still a problem, especially with top talent, because companies aren't going away, right? They may not be hiring as much, but top talent's still very valuable.
Yeah. It's the people that make the company when they build the company. What are your thoughts on the future of talent acquisition?
It's going to be run by robots.
Yeah.
No, robots will definitely have a role, and maybe eventually it actually is run by robots. Who knows? But I don't encourage my children to follow my footsteps.
Mm-hmm.
They chose to do that. That's fine. I think everybody needs to find their own thing. But I think from my perspective, the future is definitely going to be, we're going to be far more strategic than even we've been in the last 5 to 7 years, which to me has sort of been a revolution, where we brought executive search in-house, and we've brought in talent marketing, and I mean, we literally are running it like a small business. It just brought it all in-house instead of outsourcing it. I think you'll see more of that, and then I think you'll see, I actually honestly think that there's going to be some kind of consolidation, especially in today's environment, where technology, it's going to play a major role, but there may not be as many options. And so I think organizations that understand that and are able to leverage technology in new and innovative ways, where they're measuring, they're taking actions and they're measuring the results of those actions, and they're able to take turns and make changes to predict sort of down issues. I think those people are going to do well in terms of talent acquisition, and I think part of that is being on teams that are paying attention to what's going on, to not being afraid of new ideas, and to challenging the status quo. Yep.
And is there anything that you would like to emphasize that I have not asked?
Oh, I don't do radio shows very often, so I think we're doing great in terms of covering some really interesting subjects.
Yeah, I think we are. This is awesome. And if folks have questions, where do they go to learn more? How can they contact you?
Oh, I'm easily contacted. I mean, I'm not afraid. I am literally not afraid to have conversations with anybody and everybody. So LinkedIn's a great place to find me. If you forget my email address or even my name, you can just look up talent acquisition leader at Samsung, and there'll be a bunch of us that show up. I'm the one at the Strategy and Innovation Center, which is a small, essentially strategy organization for Samsung. We are the VC arm of Samsung. So there's the Samsung Catalyst Fund and Oak and all these other organizations. Extreme Tech Challenge is another piece of what we do. So if you remember any of those things, you'll be able to find me. But my email address is firstname.lastname@samsung.com, and that's brent.powell@samsung.com.
And Brent, what is one advice that you would like to give or share to the community?
Be the smartest person in the room, but be wise enough to know when you don't need to be. Meaning, don't be a jerk.
Be humble.
Be humble. Be humble. I mean, that's a great piece of advice. I mean, in the context of looking for a role, don't be afraid of networking. Get out there, meet and speak to as many people as you can, even if you feel like you're over your head, or you feel like they wouldn't be interested in talking to you. Try and find some value in that conversation. Make good impressions. Be kind and help your peers.
I think each of us have different talent, so we always need people to succeed. So collaboration is cool.
Yeah, I agree, 100%.
Awesome. Thank you, Brent, for your time.
My pleasure, Michelle. Great to see you and hear you, and thanks for having me on the show.
Welcome. Alrighty, bye-bye.
Bye.